Montana Territory, 1881. The stagecoach rolled in under a gray sky, wheels crunching over frozen earth, when Grace Merritt stepped down with her chin high and her past packed tight in the single carpetbag she clutched like a lifeline. She did not look like a bride. Her coat was second-hand, buttons mismatched. A pale scar curved beneath her left eye, barely visible unless you were close. Her hands, red from cold, were calloused like a ranch hand's. She was 27, and every year showed in the way she scanned the town of Dry Creek like she was ready to bolt. She had no one waiting for her, not anymore. The letter she carried in her pocket, folded soft from so many rereads, had promised honest work, a quiet place to start again. She had not come looking for love. She had stopped believing in that long ago, somewhere between her first husband's fists and the night she'd run barefoot into the dark with her daughters wrapped in a quilt. Now she was alone. The girls Mabel and Millie were in Miles City, safe in a church orphanage. She had left them there 2 weeks ago with a kiss and the promise, "Mama's going to find us a home." She meant it. She would work for it, fight for it, crawl through fire for it. "Miss Merritt?" a voice said behind her. She turned. A man stood by the post of the sheriff's office, tall and broad-shouldered, hat in hand. His coat was thick wool, worn at the cuffs, and his boots were dusted with snow. He looked like he belonged to the land, weathered, unshaken. His hair was dark, his eyes a quiet kind of blue. "I am," she said, wary. "I am Sheriff Xander Rhoades. I reckon you're here about the housekeeper posting." She nodded once. "Yes, sir, I am," he motioned with his head. "Come on then. The boarding house is up the way. You can warm up there, get a meal. My sister runs it." "You will meet her first, see if it suits." She followed him. The town was small. One main street flanked by a smithy, a mercantile, a church, and a saloon whose music drifted faint through the cold. Horses whinnied from the stable behind the sheriff's office. A boy ran past with a stick and a hoop scarf flapping. Grace kept her eyes forward. Inside the boarding house, warmth hit her like a memory. Oil lamps flickered and stew simmered from a pot on the stove. A woman with auburn hair met them at the door. "Gemma, this here's Grace Merritt," Xander said. "She's answered your notice." Gemma Rhoades looked her up and down. "You got experience?" "Yes, ma'am," Grace said. "I kept house for 6 years. Cooked, cleaned, sewed. I can manage a full kitchen and fix a torn hem in under an hour." Gemma nodded. "You got a place to stay?" "Not yet." "You do now," she said simply. "Come with me, I will show you your room." That night, Grace scrubbed her hands raw in the wash basin, watching flakes of soap float over her knuckles. Her room was small but clean, a real bed with a quilt, a chair and a shelf. A window that looked out over the edge of the woods. She had not slept in a bed alone since she was 15. A knock sounded. She turned. Xander stood in the doorway, one hand braced on the frame. "I hope the room's to your liking." "It is," she said. He studied her, quiet. "You have someone waiting for you," she hesitated. "No, just me." It was not a lie. Her girls were not waiting, they were hoping. "You seem strong," he said. "Most folks wouldn't come this far alone." "I did not have much of a choice," he nodded, eyes steady. "If you need anything, you come find me, day or night." That kindness, plain-spoken, honest, hit harder than she expected. She nodded. He tipped his hat. "Rest well, Miss Merritt." The next morning, Grace was up before the sun. She tied back her hair, rolled up her sleeves, and got to work. She scrubbed the floors, peeled potatoes, and mended a shirt for one of the boarders. She moved like a woman with something to prove. Xander watched her from the porch when he passed. He saw how she worked without complaint, how she never paused except to look out the window like she was counting the days. By the 3rd day, he brought her a letter. "From Miles City," he said. She opened it fast, hands trembling. Mabel's handwriting, wobbly and sweet, spilled across the paper. "We miss you, Mama. Are you safe? Is it warm? We love you." She swallowed hard, blinking fast. Xander said nothing, but he reached out and touched her elbow, firm and gentle. "You got girls?" he asked quietly. She nodded, unable to speak. He stepped back. "We will get them here." She looked at him. "Why?" "Because no child should be without their mother, and you," he paused. "You look like you would walk through hell for them." I would, she said. The snow kept falling. Grace earned her keep. She became someone the town started nodding to. She was kind but quiet, always with her sleeves rolled and eyes sharp. She never spoke of what she had left behind, but some things did not need telling. The way she flinched at loud voices, the way she never turned her back to a door, Xander noticed it all. He watched her steady herself day by day. She never asked for help, but when he offered it, she never refused. One night after supper, he offered her a ride. "Come with me," he said. "There is something I want you to see." They rode out to the north pasture, where the land spread wide and the river ran slow under the moonlight. He dismounted first, then helped her down. She looked around. "Why here?" "I bought this land 3 years ago, built a cabin, just me and the quiet. I was going to start a family here." He paused. "That did not happen." She looked at him. "What stopped it?" She left, said I was too quiet for her, too slow. Grace laughed softly. "Some folks do not understand quiet is better than harm." He looked at her, and something passed between them, recognition, understanding. "You are not broken," he said. "Whatever happened before, it does not define you." She blinked hard. "You do not know what I have done." "I do not need to." "I see who you are now." She looked away, eyes burning. "I left my girls. I put them somewhere safe, but it still feels like I failed them." "You did what you had to," he said. "But you are not done. You are building something better." She turned to him. "Why are you helping me?" He stepped closer. "Because I see your courage, and because I want to." She stared up at him, heart thudding. He reached out, slow, careful, and brushed her hair back from her face. "Grace Merritt, I swear to you I will help you bring your girls home. And when they are here, I will help you build a life, if you let me." She did not speak, but she did not pull away, and somewhere deep inside her, something that had been locked tight for years began to open. By the second week, the sun sat longer in the sky, casting pale light across the thawing edges of town. Chickens had begun scratching in the yard behind the boarding house, and the dirt roads, once hard packed under snow, turned to thick mud where wagon wheels sank deep. Grace stood at the kitchen counter, rolling out dough for supper biscuits, her palms dusted in flour. She'd taken to humming under her breath, not tunes from memory, but sounds that filled the quiet in her chest. Her sleeves were damp from the water bucket, and a lock of hair had slipped from her braid, curling against her cheek. Gemma walked in from the back porch, wiping her hands on her apron. "You get a letter yet this week?" Grace shook her head. "I figure I will in a few days." "Mabel's slow with her spelling, bless her." Gemma leaned against the doorframe. "Xander's been asking after you more than usual. Can't hardly bring in a saddle without wondering if you've eaten or slept." Grace kept her eyes on the dough. "He's kind. Kind's one word for it." "Devoted's another." Grace didn't answer. Her heart hadn't settled long enough to name what it felt. Later that evening, after the supper dishes were stacked and the lamplight dimmed low, Grace stepped out into the yard behind the boarding house. The air was sharper than it had been at midday, and a thin mist hovered over the grass where snow had melted earlier. Xander stood by the fence, one boot on the bottom rail, a kerosene lantern balanced on the post beside him. He turned when he heard her steps. "I was hoping you'd come out," he said. "I needed air." He nodded. "You walk like someone who listens to the ground." She joined him at the fence. "When you've had to leave in the night, you learn to notice things. Sound of ice breaking on a roof, breath in the dark." He looked at her, not with pity, but with something steadier. "You ever think about what comes after all the hards behind you?" She folded her arms, the cuffs of her dress brushing her wrists. "I try not to hope too far ahead." "Is it hope," he asked, "or fear of being disappointed again?" She didn't answer. He turned toward the barn. "I've been fixing the loft. Thought it might suit 2 little girls come spring. There's room for shelves and a window that faces east." She blinked. "You don't owe me that." "I know," he said. "But I want to. You've been carrying so much alone, Grace. Seems to me someone ought to share the weight." She looked at him then, really looked. His hands were rough, knuckles scarred. He wore the kind of tired that came from honest work, not burden. And he didn't watch her like a man waiting for something in return. He just stood there, offering quiet and presence. I don't know how to be someone who accepts help, she said. You don't have to know, he said gently. You just have to let yourself be worth it. She turned away, swallowing thickly. If I bring Mabel and Millie here, they'll need more than a roof. They'll need safety, steadiness, someone who doesn't leave when things turn hard. I don't leave, he said. The words hung there, simple and unadorned. She nodded once, then walked back toward the house, the lantern glow stretching long behind her. 3 days later, she stood on the platform in Miles City, boots scuffed from travel, breath fogging in the cold. She held a small parcel of sweet biscuits wrapped in cloth. Her fingers trembled where they clutched the edge of her shawl. The train hissed to a stop. 2 girls stepped down from the car, one with dark braids and a missing tooth, the other with a frayed ribbon in her hair. Their eyes scanned the crowd until they saw her. Mama! They flung themselves into her arms, and she sank to her knees on the wooden platform, pressing kisses to their cold cheeks, her shoulders shaking. Xander stood a few paces behind, hat in hand, letting the moment be hers. Mabel looked up at him, then back at her mother. Is he the one who wrote the letter for you? Grace nodded, smoothing the ribbon back into place. That's Sheriff Rhoades. Millie tilted her head. He looks nice. He is, Grace said quietly. He's the reason we have somewhere to go. They gathered their things and rode together in the wagon, Mabel nestled against her mother's side, Millie dozing on Xander's shoulder by the time they reached Dry Creek. Grace watched the town approach the church steeple, the smoke rising from chimneys, the familiar porch of the boarding house. Her chest ached with something warm. That night, after the girls had eaten and curled up in the room Gemma set aside for them, Grace stepped into the hallway and found Xander waiting on the stairs. They settled? He asked. They're safe, she said. He nodded, then looked down the stairwell. I never asked for much out of life. Just land to call mine and peace to sleep by, but I'd like to add something. She watched him. You, he said. And your girls, if you'll have me. Her breath caught. I don't want to rush you, he said. But I'm not just offering help anymore, I'm offering a life. With room for every part of you, past, present, and what comes next. She stepped closer. You're asking a woman who's been hurt to believe in something whole. I'm not asking for belief, he said, just a chance to show you it's possible. She placed her hand over his. Then I reckon you've got it. The wind carried the smell of thawed pasture and damp pine when Xander finished hammering the last board into place on the lean-to behind his cabin. His shirt clung to his back, sleeves rolled past his elbows, sawdust clinging to the sweat at his forearms. He stepped back, rubbed his neck, and turned toward the voices drifting from the front of the house. Grace sat on the porch steps, mending a rip in Millie's sleeve while the girls played nearby with a pair of carved horses Xander had made from scrap wood. Mabel had braided a length of faded ribbon into one of the toys' manes, her tongue caught between her teeth in concentration. Millie looked up and spotted him first. Sheriff, is this your house now? He wiped his hands on a cloth and crouched beside her. It's been mine a while. But it didn't feel full till you two arrived. She tilted her head. Then where did you keep your supper before us? He chuckled low. Mostly on the stove, sometimes cold. Grace set down her sewing, her eyes soft but unreadable. We'll have to teach him better. Later, inside, he lit the stove while Grace stirred a pot of beans and pork. The girls had curled up on a pallet by the hearth, whispering stories to each other in voices too quiet to follow. Xander poured water into a basin and set it by the door. Grace glanced at him. I'll see about getting a curtain up between the front and back rooms. Won't be proper to all sleep in the same space forever. I was thinking the same, he said. Then quieter, I've started drawing plans for a second room. She didn't answer right away, just stirred the pot slowly, the wooden spoon moving in circles. You don't have to build around us, Xander. I'm not, he said. I'm building with you. She folded a dish towel, then unfolded it again. There's still days I wake up expecting to have to run. He leaned against the counter, arms crossed. I know. I don't want my daughters learning fear like that. I want them to grow with steadiness under their feet. He stepped forward. Then let's give them that. One day at a time. She looked up at him, And this time, the quiet wasn't weighted, it was full of something gathering strength. The next morning, Grace walked with Mabel to the schoolhouse. Her daughter carried a slate tucked under her arm, the new blue ribbon in her hair fluttering in the breeze. They passed the mercantile, where the clerk nodded politely, and the chapel, where the bell rope swung gently in the wind. When they reached the schoolyard, Mabel hesitated. Grace crouched beside her. "You'll be all right, sweetheart. Just listen well and don't be afraid to ask the teacher if you're unsure." Mabel clutched her hand. "What if the other children think we're different?" Grace brushed a strand of hair from her daughter's cheek. "Everyone's different in some way. That's nothing to be ashamed of." Mabel nodded slowly and walked toward the door. Grace stood there until the teacher, a gray-haired woman in a burgundy shawl, welcomed her daughter inside. On the walk back, she didn't take the main road. Instead, she followed the path behind the blacksmith's, where the grass was just beginning to poke through the last of the snow. Her feet carried her to the edge of the creek, where the water ran fast and clear. She sat on a flat rock and let the sound fill her. Xander found her there not long after. He didn't speak, just sat beside her close enough that their shoulders brushed. She turned to him. "I didn't think I'd ever feel still again." He picked up a stone and passed it from palm to palm. "Stillness doesn't mean nothing's happening. It just means there's peace in it." She watched the water. "Peace used to feel like something I had to borrow, like it didn't belong to me." He was quiet for a moment. "It belongs to you now." She looked at him fully, her voice steady. "I want to build this life with you, Xander. Not just for the girls, for myself too." He reached for her hand, calloused fingers curling around hers. "Then it'll be ours," he said, "in every way that counts." She didn't need to reply. The way her hand stayed in his, warm and sure, said more than words could. The girls took to the rhythm of the cabin like roots to thawed ground. Millie gathered kindling each morning with a woven basket Xander had shaped from willow. And Mabel read aloud from a worn reader book by the hearth, her voice clear and rising. Grace stitched curtains from old muslin, hung them in the windows with bits of bent nail and string, and began planting a small kitchen garden behind the house. Onions, turnips, and beans set careful into soil still waking from the cold. Xander cleared more of the pasture, working from dawn to near dark, but he always came home before the girls' bedtime. They waited for him by the fence, their hands tucked into his, one on each side, while Grace watched from the porch with a soft ache she couldn't name. One evening, as the shadows grew long and the lanterns hadn't yet been lit, Grace stood beside him in the lean-to, watching him fit a brace into the corner beam. She held the lantern up steady, her other hand wrapped around her wrist. "I got a letter from the county clerk," she said. He glanced over, brow raised. "They've finalized the annulment. My name's mine again." He set the hammer down and stepped closer, wiping the dust from his fingers. "You all right?" She nodded. "I thought I'd feel lighter, but it's more like unfinished. Like a page torn out of a book." Xander leaned against the post. "You're allowed to carry the weight of what came before, even when it's over. Doesn't mean you haven't moved forward." Grace looked down at her hands. "I spent years learning how to disappear. Now I'm trying to remember how to be seen." "You don't have to remember," he said. "Just let yourself belong." She didn't speak for a moment. Then, "I'd like to file the girls' new guardianship papers next week, make it legal. I want their names tied to this land, not a ledger in Miles City." "I'll ride with you," he said. "Stand beside you while you sign it." She looked at him then, lantern light flickering in her eyes. "You always mean what you say." "I've learned not to say what I can't stand behind." His voice was low. "And I've never said anything truer than wanting to build this life with you." She set the lantern down and reached for his hand. "Then let's make it ours." The next morning, they rode to town as a family. Mabel wore a bonnet too big around the brim, and Millie clutched a cloth rabbit Grace had sewn from an old petticoat. They sat tucked in the wagon bed, whispering stories under a quilt while the wheels creaked over the rutted road. At the clerk's office, Grace signed her name with a steady hand. Xander stood behind her, one hand resting lightly at the small of her back, grounding her. The girls watched from the bench, legs swinging. The clerk finished stamping the papers and looked up. "You'll be listed as sole guardian now, that clear?" "Yes, sir," Grace said. "Perfectly." As they stepped outside, the sun broke through a veil of cloud, warming the street in gold. Mabel tugged at Grace's sleeve. "Does this mean we belong here now, proper?" Grace looked down at her, then at Xander. "Yes, sweetheart, this is home now." That evening, Xander brought up 2 chairs from the cellar and placed them beside the front porch. They sat together after the girls had gone to sleep, the moon casting silver across the yard. "I'm not a man who's ever asked for much," he said, fingers laced together. "But I'd like to ask you something now." Grace turned toward him, heart quiet but alert. "I want to make a vow that stands as strong as land and fire. Not just for your sake or the girls, for mine too. You came here looking for work. What I found was someone I want to build every season beside. I want to call you wife if you'll have me." She didn't cry, she didn't falter. She reached for his hand, fingers threading through his. "Yes," she said. "Not because I need saving, but because with you I'm not afraid of being seen." He nodded once, and in that silence, something sacred passed between them, stronger than paper or prayer. A promise rooted not in rescue, but in recognition. Their hands remained joined as the night deepened, 2 lanterns burning behind the windows, and peace settling around them like the slow fall of dusk. The wedding took place in early June, when the cottonwood trees shook their green leaves like music, and the creek behind the cabin ran clear and fast. It was small, just as Grace had asked, no fuss, no lace, no preacher from Helena with a voice like thunder. The ceremony was held in the chapel along Dry Creek's edge, its wide plank floor swept clean. The pews filled with neighbors who'd come to know her not as a woman who arrived alone, but as one who stayed and made something solid. Grace wore a pale blue dress Gemma had helped her stitch, plain-bodied with a hem just long enough to brush her boots. Her hair was pulled back in a braid coiled low. Mabel tucked a sprig of wild mint behind her ear before they stepped inside. Xander stood at the front, coat pressed, boots polished to a dull shine, hands folded behind his back. His eyes never left her once she entered. The vows were spoken quiet and clear, hands joined, the weight of the past unspoken but present acknowledged not in words, but in the way Grace's voice didn't tremble, and how Xander held her hand like it was already home. Afterward, they gathered behind the chapel where tables had been set with bread and pickled beans, roasted chicken, and a berry pie Gemma had baked that morning. Mabel and Millie darted through the grass, their laughter lifting above the wind, and no one mentioned the years before. That night, as the lantern burned low in the front room of the cabin, Grace stood barefoot at the window, watching the last of the guests trail away down the ridge. Xander came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist, silent. She leaned back into him. "I didn't think this kind of quiet could feel so full." He pressed a kiss to the curve of her neck. "It's ours now, not borrowed, not temporary." She turned in his arms. "I want to grow old here, with you, watching the girls grow straight and strong. I want to plant fruit trees, teach them to ride, see their faces light up when the first snow falls." He brushed a thumb beneath her eye. "Then we will, every piece of it." 3 seasons passed. By the following spring, the cabin had doubled in size. Xander built the new room himself, plank by plank, with Mabel handing him nails and Millie sweeping sawdust from the floor. Grace hung a quilt across the doorway the day it was finished and set a jar of dried lavender on the windowsill. The garden yielded its first full crop, that summer green beans, squash, and rows of carrots Grace harvested with the girls after supper. They started keeping hens behind the barn, and Xander traded lumberwork for a milk cow from a rancher out near Fort Keogh. Mabel named her Hazel and sang to her every morning before milking. On Sundays, they walked to the chapel as a family, the girls in cotton dresses, Grace's hand tucked into Xander's elbow. Folks nodded to them now, not out of politeness, but familiarity. Grace taught the younger children their letters on Wednesdays in the schoolhouse, and Xander began training a deputy to share his rounds. One afternoon in late August, Grace stood at the edge of the pasture, her hand resting on the round of her belly. The child growing inside her was steady, now no longer a secret, but a promise. Xander had guessed before she'd spoken it aloud, simply reached out one morning and laid his hand over hers without a word. Now he joined her at the fence, wiping sweat from his forehead with a strip of linen. "You've been standing there a while," she smiled. "Just thinking how far we've come." He leaned beside her. "I remember the day you got off that stagecoach. You didn't look afraid, but you looked ready to fight the world." "I was." His fingers brushed hers. "And now I'm not fighting," she said. "Just building." He kissed her temple. "You've built something beautiful here. When the baby came in the heart of winter, the storm had already been blowing for 3 days. Snow piled high against the porch rail, and Xander kept the fire fed while Mabel heated water and Millie sat near Grace, clutching her hand when the pain crested. It was a girl, born just as morning light broke through the frost-laced window, her cry fierce and sure. They named her Clara. That night, Grace cradled her newborn in the rocking chair by the hearth while Xander held Millie close and Mabel read softly from her primer. The storm had passed. The world outside was still and white, but inside the air was warm with wood smoke and the baby's breath was soft against Grace's collarbone. She looked up at Xander. "This is the life I never knew I could have." He reached for her hand. "It's the life we made." Together, they stayed like that, wrapped in the hush of new beginnings, the girls safe beside them, the fire casting gold across the walls of the home they'd built with hands and heart. And when spring came again, the trees along the creek budded early, and the land stretched wide around them, quiet, certain, and full of promise.